Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is Lisa Retamozo with NEC and also with Mary Meeks out there in California, correct? Great.
Yes,
Great, Mary. Thanks for joining us.
we are.
I think y'all got to see her there for a second. And that's totally cool, Mary, whatever you want to do.
I'm back with their mouse over here. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. I think they're all trying to like, oh my gosh, we're getting out of here, but
Oh,
they're
no, no, no.
they're glad to it. They're all right here close. They're just like, okay, we don't want to be on
Great. The more, the merrier. Thank you all for joining us. This is I think, our third time meeting to go over anything and everything regarding the APR. First, we're going to start with any questions y'all may have. And then we can talk about certain fields. I know last time we spent a lot of time talking about two fields that are so, to me, Mary, I think the Veterans Upward Bound, I was just telling somebody else, to me is the most complicated. I think it's as complicated, more complicated than McNair. That completion and all that stuff, it all depends. You guys have to have your own internal definition to follow on some of those fields there. So much respect to Veterans Upward Bound. It is not an easy report. So I'm so glad we're having an opportunity to have Mary, meet with us, discuss certain questions you all may have. I'm going to turn it over to her here in a second. And Mary, I will be showing, like we did last time, back and forth. You just tell me, and everyone, if you have a question, you could, raise your hand so we can let you, uh, ask your question live, or if you'd like to put it in the Q&A. But I would please tell me what field. People will start with a question and I'm like, what field? So I can show in both places. So if you see my hand come up, Mary, raising my hand is probably to ask you what field. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to turn off the video and we are recording and let's get started. So let's see. I don't think anyone has any questions right now. So I don't know, Mary, what did you want to start with?
Sure. Well, last week we talked a lot about the difference between a project year and the academic year, or when people complete the program, and knowing about those kinds of things. So that was definitely, I think this question third. Let me look right here. Let me get my stuff. Because that question has come up here, and for these guys, and I know that so it's all about your 12-month project period. But if you're looking also in the directions, so I'm going to go too much here, but I do want to point out for these folks, just as we did with you, when we're looking at question 31, so you go down a little further in this instruction packet, Lisa.
Will do.
Field 31.
Okay. Whoops.
It talks about, it's kind of, yeah, right there at that the majority of projects have that September 1 to August 31. But we also know there really are programs who started October 1. And so knowing about when somebody completes your project, that it is talking about within your project year. And so it's based on your own project year. And so just like when Lisa was looking at back on that very front page, it said that's a 12-month period. That is your project year. And you could find that information on your GAN. So we've got people that have to do lots of information and lots of things. And when you're figuring out, looking at completing the program and when that is, and when is your project year, you also need to know and understand about academic year when you're trying to start doing the post-secondary completion, their cohort for post-secondary. But anyway, and there's like pages and pages. Field 38 has lots of instruction, even here in the narrative part when you're looking. So I know I get lots, we deal with lots of questions here on field 38 about their PS&E, when they started to school, and sitting a post-secondary cohort. and it's so important. It can't be changed after this, but it does talk about clearly here that we're not talking about project years, but we're talking about cohort years. And I had a couple of people call me after that, still, this is still a very confusing, but there's like 2 or 3 pages. And then as you go down in this draft, even in these instructions, it also has like a 3-page table that, so if you keep going down here in this instructions right here, Lisa, on further, these colored sheets, it's a 3-page narrative that talks to you about when they completed your program year, and then if they enrolled within these dates, and then what that enrollment cohort. So sometimes it's still confusing. Sometimes it's very straightforward. You're going, okay, yeah, they participated, they were active, now they've gone. But if you have any questions or any times or any certain folks, and we looked at that, I think maybe Tara, what it showed us before of setting an example of where she had someone, how their completion was. But there's a lot of information here over establishing a completion year cohort and then a post-secondary enrollment cohort. And so those are different things. Talking about project years, then you're talking about an academic year is how they set the post-secondary enrollment cohort. Okay. Anybody have any? Yeah, so go ahead, Lisa.
I was just going to say these instructions are pretty darn good. I mean, they're very helpful. I mean, I may have to read them 2 or 3 times,
Yeah.
to make sure I have my definitions straight. And then at the very end, you've got literally 6 to 7 pages of color-coded charts to talk you through at the very end. So, I have to be honest with you, Mary, with most of the other APRs, I usually just look at the other document that has the sections, just the fields and the little codes. And I've been bad about not looking at the instructions. But for Veterans Upward Bound, you really have to have both documents printed out as you are in either student access or in Bloomin to help you think through this and get the correct answer the first time. They're pretty good instructions. I mean, they're very thorough, but I'm bad about not reading them. You know what I mean? So I have to go back and look at them. We do have a couple of questions, Mary, if you're ready for that, unless you want to
Yes,
talk
yes,
about
no,
something else.
I'm trying to read that. I want to make
Yeah,
sure, want to let her talk so we can explain and make sure.
yes, I'm gonna let Victoria, thank you for your questions. I'm gonna go ahead and I should be able to, right, Donna, give Victoria access to share and to speak. So let me go and find Victoria. And yes, please share your screen. And anybody else, this is a really good opportunity to sometimes we're visual people, right? And we have to go ahead and share. Our screens might, yeah, at least to me, I always say, show me what you're talking about, So Victoria, you should be, I'm going to stop sharing so that you should go ahead and be able to share your screen. Can you hear us? And you should be able to speak.
Yes, hello.
Hi, Victoria. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for hosting these. I was prepping the APR stuff today and I was so thankful because I ran into these questions and I was like, well, this is perfect. I'm going to be able to talk to them.
Oh, I'm so glad. Thanks for telling us that.
But let me go ahead and share my screen. So we were exploring a new way of tracking our participants. So we have an Excel sheet and then we have student access. And we're trying to update our policy manual so that way that when the staff are working with a student that's a readmit, I could say, okay, these are the fields that you need to update in student access if they already have a profile. But then I realized when I was doing this, maybe I should not have done that. So let me figure out how to share my screen.
Yeah, because you're asking about somebody who's coming back after, and you're trying to enter data for 24, 25. So not, and this is where it really does get confusing sometimes. And some databases do better at keeping it, they all say they keep it separate. But I know sometimes it causes little glitches in places if you're trying to update some things too soon, or their final status that might be different.
Yeah.
Or 1 year for, so their 23, 24 data. I think in our very first session, we were talking about this, that and back in that this is a 12-month period. What you're reporting on is a 12-month period for the program based on your project year. So whether that's September 1 to August 31 or October 1 to September 30th, but we're trying to focus on and answer questions based on what that status is. So you're trying to draw a line at either August 31 or September 1, depending on your project year's information. But here we are 6 months already into the new program year. And so like Lisa had said, like, we know too much, we already know these things have happened. And sometimes it says, send us that information based on what the most recent thing is, but it could cause errors if you need to have this status for that person. So go ahead and you can share that. So you have a student's record.
Yeah, so I think exactly what you're saying. We're trying to keep it updated for this year. So we had Logan come back and we said, okay, he's a readmit student. So we had gone in here and changed all of this on the perm page, even though he has, information all the way back to.
Right. And I'm not completely, familiar with student access. I always used Bloomin' in my background, and Lisa, I'm sure she knows more about access. I know she knows lots about Bloomin' because she does a lot of them. But if you, so on this permanent page, so my question is, when student access creates your data file that you're going to upload into the Department of Ed's page, is that from this student's permanent information?
Yes.
Okay, so so for 23, 24, what you're wanting to report on for them, he had not enrolled, but he was not still in your was he out of your program? When was the last date of that he has been continuing all this time? Or for 22, 23, you're wanting to say he's still.
No, so for 22, 23, and so then it goes into year information, which is a little confusing. So for 22, 23, he was prior year. So we didn't do anything.
Okay, so he wasn't active at all. He didn't receive services. That matters, because if you change that for 22, okay, so for 22, 23, or 23, 24, you want him to be a prior year participant and he did not receive services. A lot of the questions that you have to answer are going to be not applicable because he's a past participant.
Right.
Now he's re-entering there's no place to put a re-entry date. That may be your own record finding, because it goes back to his first original entry date with you. But did he ever go to school? Did you ever report in the past that he entered school?
No, we had not. And so I think what I'll need to do is go back to our last year's APR and change this to what it was. And then February or
but for this APR, for you to have the data correct, I would not change his permanent page yet.
We already changed it is the problem. So that's what I was like, I have been telling people, so we have re-entry participants how to do it. And for here, I had said to change it all to 8s. But I think now that was the wrong choice.
And it's really hard, because if you're not and this is where it makes it difficult, because you're going to change this data. So once you create the data file that you need to upload to the Department of Ed, you want all your answers to be the answers for 22, for 23, 24, like that you want them. And for this individual, he needs to be a past participant. So all of your answers need to have that he's a past participant. And
Right.
so everywhere in there. And if he didn't complete your program, you would have, you know, the 8888s and the 9999s, but you don't want him to be active. But if you change his status
Mhm.
in question 20, yeah, right, that you, if you change that, where it has, where the answer, and that, I don't know if that one is gonna change, where they're either new, continuing, or re-entry.
Oh, that's
And
the year. So for
okay,
this year, he's re-entry, right? But then in last year, it still says he's prior, so.
okay. So you want him to stay prior. When you have that, then see all of those things change below to say not applicable prior participant. But the minute that you change him to be a reentry participant, and that's what he'll be for 24, 25. If he didn't participate at all in 23, 24, he's going to be a re-entry participant. But when you change that, then all of these things, you have to now answer
Yeah.
all of these things for him. And you have to have a status because he becomes part of your number for 24, 25. He's going to be part of your active participants. Yeah.
On pages 8 through 10 of the APR instructions document, they will list all the fields that should not be changed.
Okay.
And they will also go into fields that should or may be changed as needed. So there's a really good description there also as well in the instructions page. You won't necessarily get that in the document that shows all the fields only and the answers. So check that out as well. Victoria, I think you have another question too that you might want to show us.
Yeah, so this question might be more of a compliance or student access question, but we had been noting in my past program, the contacts section was when we had seen the person or talked to them. But I think there might have been a miscommunication, misunderstanding. We've now logged things like this, but it was just a text message about a workshop. So he didn't come to this workshop. We had sent out like a mass email and
Okay.
logged it as a contact. And I'm thinking that
Well,
was
under that drop down menu up there where it says type, the email a choice. It was advising, it was a check-in,
Maybe she could, sounds like she can.
and maybe you can add, I mean, I don't know if you have, is it a choice for you? I know in Bloomin' it has a choice. Is it, you know, how is your contact? Is it in person? Is it by phone? Is it by text message? Is it something? So,
is it a contact if we don't hear back from them? Like if we're just sending a mass email.
well, here's the thing, and I know that's a hard thing, at least it definitely has, but okay, so you're attempting to make a contact, but keep in mind, so I would call that as like, okay, I'm trying to make contact. The Department of Ed does not totally count it as a contact until there has been a circle made, like if you've actually seen them, especially if, for example, a service provided. So, right, because because there were some programs who are saying, well, we did all this. Okay, well, what did you do? Well, you sent an email, sent an email, sent an email, sent an email, but I never had anything returned from them, or I didn't have any contact. I didn't actually hear from that participant. They didn't, like on this, if you've got the contact as it's a workshop, but they didn't tell them, you might want to, and maybe this is, you know, depending on your database, how you, put this, or if it's the type here, if you can add to that list and you can say it's an email and you put in there your reason was to notify them of a workshop, but then you can see, you know, sent email sent on such and such day, and that, so you have that. Well, if that student responds, or one of the things I would like to do is, you know, when I send out emails is that I ask for a response, you know, like I want to know if they received it. I want to know if they, you know, if they would respond. And I would try to tell my folks, like, I need you to respond, like, okay, got it. I'm planning to be there, or thanks for this information, or something that helps you have that complete circle of what, you know, the Department of Ed would acknowledge, like, okay, you actually had some interaction, specific interaction, even if it's virtual. It wasn't face to face. It's easier when we said, I'm seeing you face to face. I'm talking to you. I heard, you know, we had a contact together. But if you're just sending stuff, you know, in my office, we called it, yeah, I'm attempting to make contacts with them. I'm sending them information, but I need to get something from them that shows me they really got it. How do I know they are using that information? They did something with it. It's not just all of my contacts don't have anything going on with them. Lisa, do you have anything that you could add to that?
Yeah, I love this question. I love this question. And this is across the board for all the TRIO programs, not just for veterans Upward Bound. So, you know, in the regulations and in anything in OMB or uniform guidance, they never mention the word contacts. We have adopted that because most of our vendors use, you know, counselor contact, tutor contact, teacher contact. I wish they would change it to say service contact. So I've instructed my clients, whether they're using Bloomin or Student Access or whatever, to not document as a service provided when it was just a blast email sent out. I call that the cost of doing business. You know, invitations need to go out. You need to make attempts to bring people in. Now, maybe that's documented in another place in the database. I know Bloomin has something called notes. So when we send stuff out and you can generate, so if I send everybody an invitation to a workshop, we document it under notes, but not as a service until they actually receive the service, almost like a cash register. It's a sale. Attempts to make the sale, we may document separately. The reason we do that is that we don't want to mix up attempts to contact or one-way communication only gets mixed up with, oh, they received a service, because that may not hold in a review or an audit. They could say, well, you sent them 3 emails about workshop information. That's not a service provided. So you never want to be in that situation. But I understand the need to possibly in a different area here in student access, and I'm not sure where you can do that, or maybe comments, and just keep it separate and so it doesn't get mixed up with the actual sales. Now, that being said, especially with Veterans Upward Bound and also SSS and McNair, NEOC, we're seeing that the majority of our services are now individual and the majority of them are online via Zoom like this, either one-on-one or Teams or Google Meet or phone or even texting services, or answering questions. I do a lot of that with my TRIO clients. So I would make sure that, you know, if a service was indeed provided, there was an option where I can say it was done via email or via text, and then I would select the service separate from just being an update like this, something like that. So keep it separate. I would also recommend that you have some way that you can verify that that service was provided not in person. Like if it's via Zoom or Google, you have some documentation, or you can create a link, a Google link, and you can make it short and sweet, and you can always send that out with your text messages or on the bottom of your email.
Oh, yeah.
For your participant to click, and so they're virtually signing in as opposed to coming into the office and signing in. So you have that verification while you do your documentation as a service provided. But if it's communication only, please try to keep it separate if you want to keep track of that.
No, I think that's excellent. That's a good, yeah.
You know what I mean? It cuts down also on the data entry, but I do realize sometimes we need to have a history of how many times we tried to contact somebody to come in, right? Before we have to make a move. But see if you can put it in a separate place. I think this comments window that you're sharing with us, this does not count toward any of the APR services or doesn't get mixed up with actual services, correct?
Right.
This is where I would put it. And you should have a record and you could go back and look possibly and get a report so you could see every time that attempts were made to contact them or where they received one-way communication.
Okay.
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 Right.
That was
Excellent question though.
yeah, a great answer. That helped a lot. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So let's see if we have any other questions. And thanks for sharing. I don't know if you have any other questions that you wanted to share or on your screen. You know, Victoria, right? Or if you had any anything else you wanted to share about the APR, your fields.
Nope, those are my big two questions. So I appreciate you guys, and I'll help off the share function now.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for sharing. That was very helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. Anybody else have any other questions? We got some people with us, and then Mary, I don't know if you want to go back and have me share anything or any fields.
Well, I know there's always question, but I'm just hopeful. I know everybody's like, oh my gosh, when are we gonna know? When are we gonna, but it's so good if if you're ready, if you've gotten things, if you've verified your data, you've double checked. And so we really wanna, this is the last time that we have some time scheduled to ask some questions. It's not necessarily like, okay, if you don't ask your question today, it's done, but how we can help or make sure that we're getting your questions. And please don't be shy about asking them, because if you have a question or you have a situation, somebody else might be having that same kind of question. And we want to make sure that we can address those things.
So Mary, I have on the screen, that pages 8, 9, and 10 that go through all the fields, just very briefly, the instructions.
Yes.
Once again, so do you want to kind of do an overview and then just mention
sure.
what things can change or what can't? I love that you guys are updating your 24-25 database. I love that because that's the way it should be. Instead of just, messing with it once a year, right? So
Yes.
these first fields are the easiest ones, I think, right? Typically.
Yeah. Well, this is the information. And of course, for the APR, in whatever database you have, or you have that, you've got 50 fields of data that we're going to be looking at. These first 3 automatically are identified. The Department of Ed puts these, but you probably have entered this into your database that identifies you, and they should be, when they create that for you, that's there. Please keep in mind, though, this is a good time, especially all your new folks that you're entering for the first time. You can't change this after this. So you want to know that you've got names spelled correctly, that you've got dates of birth done correctly. So as you're going down in these data fields, so they're down below, all of these fields right here, you cannot change once you submit your initial time. So you want to really verify that you have all of this in here correctly. If you spell somebody's name wrong, or you don't have a middle initial, or you put in the wrong one, you've got a date of birth that doesn't work. The Department of Ed, in the APR, it's just going to assume what you put in there is right. There's nothing that it's going to go back and say, oh, wait, this doesn't agree with this answer and this answer. You're the one putting this information in here. You need to know every, one of the questions I got yesterday was just like, well, what are these warnings for that? Okay, all your information has to be readily verifiable. And there's, you want to know that it's right as you can get it. Because if you're reporting somebody's eligibility, this is when you're telling the Department of Ed that I have this, and that I know if I'm counting them as low income or first generation, you've got some assurances, you've got things that they're basing all of the information on your project. And you want to know, what do you have to back this up? How do I know this? How am I deciding that first data service, what their educational staff, those are all things that should probably be on your application, you knew initially. And then there are also some in this group that's down below it, that things that once you enter, depending on their status, there's going to be an answer. But most of these in this next little group, Lisa, down below, if you kind of advance just a little bit more.
I just wanted to confirm real quick that all these fields here, once they go in wrong, they stay wrong.
That's
and
right.
the only thing that you won't have for somebody new is the case number. You won't have that until you submit the APR online. And I believe, Mary, hopefully like it is with SSS and Upward Bound, when they give you the Department of Ed's version of the Excel file, you uploaded them immediately. There should be case numbers on there for the new students, and you could update those right away. But you don't have any case numbers for any new students until after the report's been submitted, correct?
Right, that's right. That's right.
And also, I love this, you know, I could see myself using the instructions here and copy and pasting them into my policies procedures manual when I'm trying to describe to someone what needs to be entered into either student access or Bloomin' when somebody's brand new. What must be answered? These are fields that happen when someone is brand new. Like Mary said, they either come from the application or from a combination of, you know, some discussion that y'all have, because veterans won't know what if they're at risk, right? That you will ask questions, but you all have to determine that. They also won't really know what their first day of project service was, you know, and that comes from when you provide the first service. And then 23 and 24, that's all when they're brand new in the program. So these are fields that never ever change, right, Mary? You don't go back and change.
That's
Okay.
right.
And so this is the second batch here. And I'll let you go through those things as well.
Yeah, and so there's also, these are ones that you set these, an answer in these, and it's also by status, except, that they won't change subsequent. 30 is their last date of project service. And so for people who, re-enter or continuing, I mean, this may vary, based on the instructions. But if somebody, once they, complete your program and are done with you, that's set and you can't change that. And so these are important. This number 31, this educational program completion year, when they complete your program, you cannot, you know, you've set that. If you answer that they complete your program, all of these, so all of these fields is what they're telling you. These fields down below here, once you put that something has been submitted in 1 year's APR, it's not going to be changed. So these continue. Once you report they've, you know, earned a certificate degree, all of those things, a bachelor's degree. But the fields below this, this is the group that they're saying that should be reviewed and updated annually. And those are things that whenever we saw very clearly. So again, Victoria, thank you for sharing, because as she had somebody who had not completed her program and they'd been a prior year participant for she want, you know, 23, 24, but when they're moving, they've shown back up and they're going to be in here. When she changed the status, Access cleared these things and said, okay, you're going to have to report these. You want to make sure you answer these correctly. In Bloomin', whenever you have someone from 1 year to the next, all of them, they clear these and make sure, you know, like you need to update an answer into these fields. And so 25 is one that used to aggravate me a lot, because I was 1 year in particular, we had like 11 students who, or 11 participants. They weren't all current year participants, but 11 folks that we had known that passed during the year, and several of them, the majority were died by suicide. And so it was a very, very sad, hard year. But and in that next year, I was just like, if I have put that they were deceased, that's not going to change. But you know, Bloomin' so sweet, we would just say, hey, your APR says you need to visit these fields, and we're clearing that so that you're going to have to update that information every year. So you want to make sure that you have folks, but they could be a past participant or a current year. Somebody might have, you might have come into your program, been served and actually been in your program, but they could have become, they might have been deceased or incapacitated during the program year. And so you need to address it if you know that that's occurred. And because this is important to you, because in the calculations for your objectives, they pull these folks out and they don't count that against you. So it is important for you to know if you have to have that information. the participant status, whether they're new, continuing, re-entry, or a prior year participant. Every year you've got to decide, how is this, are they one of my active folks or not? The question about being served by another federal program similar to VUB during the reporting year. You have to answer this question for anybody who's active during the year. So any of those new, continuing, re-entry folks, you have to answer it. But you also have to put in an answer. Some of these say not applicable because they were a prior year participant. So, but you have to make the right choice, and they're allowing you to answer these things. The call to active duty in 28 is also about the people who were served during the program year when they were active in your program. So a lot of this has to do with were they active in your program or were they a past participant. But each one of these, you need to have an answer for these things. 29, again, is your information about, one of the things for your objective. They're getting information based on that. And so you have to update that. If they were active in your year, you're going to be answering that based on their status. When they leave your program, all of this, the source of the post-secondary education information is something they want to know. How do you know these things? Okay. Right. So you can't just, okay, well, I'm just assuming that this happened. The Department of Ed is asking you, how do you know this stuff that you're telling us? How do you know they got enrolled? How do you know if they were active? You have to answer if they were active in your program year and they just started when they start to school and you're reporting that. You have to answer the question about the remediation, number 42. And they want to know, how do you know they took a 0 level class? So they're asking you back over here in this question, how did you know that? Was it from the National Student Clearinghouse or another third party? Did the participant tell you? Do you have an official transcript? I mean, all of those things. There's a lot of things in the choice. It's really important to go through all of these questions and see what your choices are, because that gives you a lot of information about your program and how you can do what you can do. But here are these things. These can be changed. They expect you to update that information. Now, it also said this is once you set a date. So once this is asking you the question in 43, 45, 47, they want to know when, if that, you're answering if they're currently enrolled, if they're still pursuing, what level they are, or when they obtain that degree. And if you choose obtaining the degree, you also have to have a date. You're going to set the date. Well, the date for each one of these was up above, and once you set that, you can't change it. But here's where, if you made a choice in 45, you will get an error if you don't have a date over here, or if the date. So a lot of these questions, they work in tandem. They're linked or looped around, and how you answer in one place can cause you an error, if your information isn't agreeing with what was said. So it's very important for you to have all of these things and then look at those answers, update whether or not they've completed a degree and so forth. Date fields, if you're using a database, it's probably already doing this for you, but if you're making your own Excel file, you need to be aware that how all the date fields are going to be formatted, and they want them in a certain way. I think it's always interesting that most of they want you to be as accurate as you possibly can about these, and then they also have unknown as an answer, or to use zeros if you don't know. It blows my mind that they even have that down there, because that to me is just like, if you put an unknown for zeros, you're waving a red flag to the Department of Ed and say, okay, come on over here. I'm putting this person.
I do like that they make a point to remind you that these are the critical fields. I mean, we want everything to be correct, right, Mary? I mean, to the best of our knowledge. especially the first initial fields, because once they go in wrong, they have to stay wrong forever. But when it comes to these, I mean, triple check, because these are used in the math to figure out your objectives.
Yes.
So you got to make sure they're correct. Field 22, date of first project service. Date of last project service is field 30. Then field 37, date of first post-secondary enrollment, and then completion, fields 44, 46, and 48. So those can be kind of off the side as a reminder that we want to make sure that the information on these fields is absolutely correct, because it can determine whether or not we get prior experience points. Okay.
And
that's
it's important, yeah, and how, how you're setting that, because when somebody can be counted or when their cohort is, how that is, it's kind of, and then it talks about not applicable, unknown, how should they be reported? Leaving a field blank is not an option, but, and it says that unknown, they have unknown as an option. But again, I always think it's like raising a red flag for things, because sometimes you should have an idea about the day. If you're counting somebody or you're using these things, you've got to have, you've got to know what some of those dates are. But they give you that option. But please know, and I know Lisa's much more knowledgeable about them than myself, but if you have too many unknowns, there is a report. There's a report that is part of what comes out at the end of your APR. You will have an unknown report. It'll tell you how many times you chose unknown in certain fields. But the Department of Ed also has a thing. It's not written in here how much. If you have so many unknowns, how much that is, that they will reject your report. But it is a fact.
right. Sometimes I know in some of the other reports, if I don't know, and it's a choice whether like something like, did they go to college, when they were supposed to, or something like that, Mary, do they graduate? It's either yes, no, or unknown. Well, if I don't know, it's still going to be counted as a no, ultimately, right? So I might as well just say no, rather than have too many unknowns that it'll be flag it, and then I'll have to explain why I have more than a certain percentage of unknowns. So unknowns for the majority of the fields that count toward the objectives will count against you anyway. So you might as well say no, is what I'm saying. If you don't know, put no, because you might have.
I would say if I don't have a date, or if I don't know what it is, I mean, what if it's yes and here's my date? But otherwise, it's a no, yeah. Where you have something else. And like, for example, in the reason that somebody left, sometimes you go, I don't know, they just disappeared. Well, there's also, they have a big list. Maybe you knew something was going on with somebody, or you could put other. I know we've used that for lack of participation. You can make sure you look at the list and know that if there's something.
Now these go into more of the explanation for each of the fields.
Each line, yeah.
Which I think is a really good, this document, the more I look at it, it's a really good, in a way, overview of the regulations. And for those of you that are, this is for last year, but going through them right now to work on your APR for last year can also help you this year as you're selecting and making sure everybody for 24, 25, has been put in the right category. So it's a really good, I think you do two things for the price of one. Get your APR done for the previous year, but also kind of give you a heads up, a reminder of what you should be looking for in this year, And again, we talked about this last time, Mary, about field 18. I don't know if you want to stress that again. Very important, right?
Yes, field 18 is about, just keep in mind, you're answering the question, yes or no, about their at-risk field here. But they use this answer and so they're telling you, oh, hey, we're checking on field 18. When you say somebody has a low test score, we're going to be using that not only in the at-risk criteria, but also to help you know about your standardized objective, their proficiency on standardized tests. This measure of academic improvement, they're going to be taking that into account. So what was this standardized test, whatever you're using, your pretest or whatever measure that you're using to see if they've made improvement while they participated in your program is they're looking here. And so you can't change field 18 once you put an answer in there, but field 29, it might change over the years because you might not, have an answer, or if they're still participating with you and so forth. But 18 is not going to change once that it's submitted. So your at-risk criteria, there's a lot of things. And they talk about there's still a choice. Let's come up about, how long you keep those records. This is also important. And you can see, it points out, they keep on telling us. So way back in 2012 and 13, we weren't asking some of those questions. But now when they started, as far back, okay, they didn't have to answer, but now we have been having to answer, like the disability question. We've had this question for a long time. So you better know, and you should be asking and having that information all throughout. You should have an idea about that. So all your current year and your prior year participants should have this information. Academic need at the time of selection. Okay, this is really important as well. Academic need is part of your eligibility criteria. Okay, so having an idea. So if you look at 645.3, they had to have a need for academic support and to be able to pursue post-secondary. And they give you a list in field 20. The first ones is that it could be the at-risk criteria that is their academic need. But they also have additional things. And so they want to know what was their primary thing. But even though in the regs in 645.3, and those of you who sat with me through that, it could it says that it's up to the grantee, but here the Department of Ed is giving you a whole list, and they're telling you what those different kinds of academic needs are, that why do they need your program? This is part of it. Why do they need from you? They need to have a certain, what are you going to be able to do for somebody? Why are they participating in your program in the first place? And this is what you want to look at. And then, so when you look at the list that they have in question 20, there's a lot of things they have there about what is an academic need for somebody. When they came to your program, what did they need from you? I would just inject here too. I mean, I've said this lots of times, so the Department of Ed has their little list. And some of so I've started working part-time for the Veteran Student Support Services. I'm at school, and I know, so in their regulations, and which is actually where, all this back in the law. And so academic need is defined there. It says they had to have a need for the services that you provide. So that is important for you to be thinking about. What was their academic need? They need to have something, what are you going to provide them based on that need? So when you look at that list at the Department of Ed, you want to choose what you think is the primary reason that somebody came to you, and that it could be their need for financial aid or GI. It's the only place that explicitly lists GI Bill benefits and information that they might need. Okay, so academic need is one of those things that I just get way off on. Again, if you have a question, please add it to our Q&A so we can address it. But the Department of Ed keeps track of other things like recruitment, but this first date of project service, Isabel, do you have something you wanna add? Is
No,
this-
I was saying that it's super important, this data first,
Yes.
they specifically
Yeah,
say.
this sets up everything. This is the start. This is what's gonna, I'm saying this person started working with me. And I'm gonna just say, so it says your date of acceptance into the project isn't necessarily their first date of service, but they could be the same. And for most VUB projects, I would say a lot of times it is the same. But it might not be. But in high school programs, so the reason this comes up and sometimes it's worded so, you know, you might have been somewhere, if you went somewhere and you accepted applications or you took applications, or maybe you're taking them on online, but you don't process them or you don't do something with them and then provide a service. If it's another week or 2 weeks or a month down the road, I think with Veterans Upward Bound, we're like trying to take these people in, and you know, most people are struggling trying to get their numbers. So we're hopping right on this. If we get a veteran here, we're trying to process that application and get on and start providing services. Most of the time, also, when you have a veteran who comes in and they're wanting some information or they're wanting your help, they want to get on with it. You know, so if you say, well, I can't help you, or I'm not going to do anything for 2 more weeks, might be down the road. So not everybody has to do it. And sometimes you go, well, that's kind of confusing, but you cannot just, I would say this is also important for you to know, you can't provide services. You can't count services to somebody until you have that application in place. That is what starts stuff. Get the application. That's the date. After that, from that date, that you can start providing services. And after that, you can count that, but you want to know that they were eligible for your program, that you have an eligible person who meets the criteria, and they can have a start date you know, as you're moving along. So start date, real important. Establishing status, very important. You've got to decide, are they new? Are they continuing reentry? New, if they have never received services from your program, this is the first year they've come, they're going to be new for that project year. After that, if they're still participating with you, if the continuing person is somebody who received service in the also in the immediately previous year. Keep in mind, these people have to, you know, Victoria was trying to update her folks, and I've had some other, if you had somebody who was in 23-24, you're deciding and reporting on that 12-month period, but you're going to draw the line either on August 31 or September 1 and say, okay, now I'm taking them in. If they're continuing over into the very next year, they're going to be a continuing person for that next project year. They have to now receive some services in that new year that you bring them into as well. So they can't just say, well, they got services back in 23-24, and so here, but I'm going to count them and bring them apart. You got to have services in both years if they're going to be a continuing person. Reentry, there's a year in between, and then prior year are people who at some point you had they've been served, but now you're tracking them. So whether they completed your program or not, but they didn't receive any service in the current year. This is really important. This statement right here, and they refer back to this a couple of times. So they say, see, you know, question as in 26. If somebody enrolled after leaving VUB, whether or not they completed your program, they can never re-enter your program. So they can't be re-entry folks. This gets to be a problem, especially somebody comes along, and that's why I asked that for Victoria. Maybe somebody had been in her program before and now they've shown back up, and I want to change them from being a prior year participant and to be in a re-entry. If they had ever reported anything about a post-secondary enrollment, it will cause an error. And even if they didn't complete your program or not. Any questions? Any comments?
I don't see any right now, Mary. Just trying to get through. We have a couple of minutes left. We have about 5 minutes left. So I
Okay,
think we
okay,
talked about
okay, sure, yep,
29, 30. I don't know. I'm just going to go
Yep,
through
yep.
see anything you
And
want.
last date of service is real important, deciding that, but you get to set that. It doesn't have to go back. I mean, it can be their last time that they ever did something, but it also could be when you remove them from your active list. So that's important. People are still working with you. Your database is going to put 8s in there. So regardless of the amount of time that somebody participated with you, okay, so it tells you here there's not a specific amount of time that a veteran has to, and this is different when you look at the definition of a participant, but it's also in these instructions back on, who to include back on page 8, it said that a participant as defined for veterans upward bound, the definition is if they have received services regardless of the amount of time. So, but it also says at the end of this paragraph where Elise is highlighting now, that you can decide when they were not active with you. So we were talking about this earlier. Somebody drops out or they just stop, they stop coming. I'm not sure. But it's every month you may, or whatever your policy is that you're reviewing, okay, this person isn't active anymore, or I haven't heard from them in, 30, 60 days. They're not responding. I'm going to drop them as an active participant. You can decide that you set that. So,
And I just wanted to pop up here for a second because that going back to that previous discussion we had with Victoria about the services versus contacts. I know in Bloomin, it will always remember the last service they received.
yes.
It stays inactive, so to speak, until I turn that person into prior year. Then it becomes activated, but it gets constantly updated with the last service they received. Now, if I was documenting any kind of contact, you see how I can kind of maybe overstate, or maybe that wasn't really a service, it was a contact if I gave myself credit for providing an email about a workshop, but they didn't attend. If it's documented in my system as a service, that would be the last service that would pop up, and it really wasn't a service. So that could kind of be confusing. So that's another reason why you want to keep your contacts separate from services provided. Okay. So let me move on.
If you use Bloomin, at first date of service and last date of service, they have their counselor contact notes override and will, even no matter if you manually put in a date. So if you want to be, you can put in that, just know that whatever you have in there, that's going to be your last date of service.
And we talked about these fields, those other fields in detail. And then 33 through 36 are those services. So it gets back to, if your system is set up so that it does receive actual services and not attempts to provide the service or let them know about a workshop, then these numbers will be, you'll be able to verify or prove either with signatures on sign-in sheets or a digital signature that they received these services. So that was the intent, Mary, right? That these.
Yes, absolutely. And right here on these 3, if you use Bloomin, it doesn't give you any place to answer these yes or no. It only goes by the activities and your counselor contacts if you have that in there as a choice. It does in Access, they give you a place to answer yes or no to these questions. But so just be aware of that how this is happening. I would just take people, and the definitions are down below in this group of instructions, or these are the services that are in 645-15. If you have any kind of question, know what they say. You need to know how you're defining that so you can be consistent to say, okay, it says basic skills remediation, or it says short-term remedial, basic. You need to know, how am I defining that? How do I know for sure that somebody is getting this service when I'm answering these things?
Right. So just a couple of minutes here. We have, I know we talked about date of post-secondary school enrollment. That's one of those important fields. as well. You can't change that, right? That says right there in bold.
Mhm.
The cohort as well. Once it's established, you can't mess with it. And then this is where we talked about how many pages, Mary. They give you here within the instructions. And then at the very end, I think, Mary, they give you those color-coded charts.
Yes.
So that is a lot of information there. You know, we started talking about this earlier, and we talked about it in previous sessions here. And, you know, there's issues about remediation here, and then we get into the credentials earned. You know, I don't know how you track remediation unless you would know if they needed remediation.
Well, you have to have, and this is where it gets down to how do you know? You would almost have to have a copy of their enrollment. How do you know they were enrolled in? It can't just be
You'd have to have a schedule.
from a transcript or schedule, yeah, schedule to know whether or not they enrolled in, or for them personally, but you have to, you've got a question to answer, so you want to know. They want to know about that. Just about the math or English.
And these are the credentials, and that would feed into the objective on post-secondary attainment. And all those instructions there. Then there's something about length of active duty. And then if you want to change the name, which is optional.
And 9, the length of active duty has to do with just the specific, they're looking at that, not that 6-year cohort year. So it's a specific cohort, post-secondary education cohort that they're asking about here. So they're trying to see, they don't give them any extra time, but they're just trying to see, did that affect them being able to graduate within that 6-year period?
Gotcha there. So it ties into nicely with 48 in a way. Okay. All righty, y'all. Well, thank you, Mary. I mean, we've run out of time. Doesn't mean that you all can't contact Mary. If you could put your email, Mary, if you don't,
Sure.
in the chat. Mary's also offering assistance. If anybody out there needs individual assistance, please go to our page, and there's a way you can communicate with her or send her an email. She's got the links to set that up as well. We also have our Veterans Upward Bound Professional Development Seminar coming up in April. So hopefully you can join us for that. This recording should be up within 24 hours. And we'll post it on our blog. You'll also receive it in the follow-up email from Zoom, thanking you for attending. So thank you so much, Mary. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Good luck on your APRs, and we're always here if you need us, okay? Y'all take care. Thanks so much. Thanks, Donna, too.
Yeah, thank you to everyone.
Bye, y'all. Thank y'all. Bye-bye.
Oh.